A big crowd there behind you. We will see and hear from President Trump there in just a bit. All right, joining us now, Ben Domenech and Meghan Hays, former Biden Director of Message Planning. Welcome to both of you. Ben, kick this off for us. Why do you feel the president sees this as an important spot for him to stop and tout the economy?
I think that there isn't any situation politically in the country that's more important than Michigan right now. It tells you the story of what's going on in the country. A battle between someone who is an extreme progressive leftist, a radical when it comes to foreign policy, and El-Sayed, someone who's more close to the center of the Democratic Party, and Haley Stevens, though she is still pretty far to the left in terms of the nature of this country. And they're going up against potentially one of the most significant candidates in the country for the Republicans, and Mike Rogers, who, almost won previously, is trying to run things back and to have a better result this time around. And I think that, quite frankly, this state could be determinative in terms of the way that we look at this coming up U.S. Senate situation. If Maine has maybe gone down a few notches, given the difficulties for Democrats there, I think Michigan is maybe the most important state in the country when it comes to this. And so, of course, the president's going to be invested in there.
Meghan, what are you watching here?
Yeah, I think that Ben is right. Michigan is an extremely important state for Democrats as well. Look, the economy there, the tariffs that President Trump has put on has cost the folks in Michigan probably close to over $2,000 a year added onto their pocketbooks. And when they can't afford things, that becomes extremely important. They've lost an incredible amount of manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan. And I just think that, the Senate race is important for keeping control of the Senate for the Republicans or for Democrats to take control. They have to keep Michigan. And this is where having someone like a Haley Stevens who can beat Mike Rogers is extremely important to the Democratic Party.
Ben, this is the political playbook on Abdul El-Sayed talking about the upcoming Michigan election. I'll put a portion of it up on your screen. During a recent Zoom donor meeting, El-Sayed indicated that a win in the August 4th contest would give him a platform to push the progressive movement forward. You put one ogre on a pike and then everyone else gets the message, and all of a sudden starts to sound a lot different, El-Sayed said. What does a comment like that tell you?
El-Sayed's a radical. He truly is. When it comes to our standing around the world, when it comes to our understanding of America's national security interests, he is someone who is not just far to the left. I frankly think that he's anti-American. And I think that this is a real test of what this progressive movement can achieve when it comes to all of these DSA candidates who've had success when it comes to Democratic primaries. It's one thing for them to win in situations where the automatic outcome, assuming you win the primary, is going to be you end up in Congress. It's another thing to actually have a Democratic senator who believes the kind of crazy things that El-Sayed believes. I understand that there are a lot of moderates who are pushing for Haley Stevens to try to block him when it comes to this situation because, as Meghan said, she can beat Mike Rogers. I think that El-Sayed is way more close to the center of gravity when it comes to the radical agenda that young Democrats in particular have been pushing over the last couple of years.
Meghan, we've seen it clearly laid out now. I carry this around with me because the topic is always with us. The DSA playbook, the platform, clearly details they want to open borders. They want to abolish ICE. They want to, do away with the Senate. They want to expand the court. It's incredible, but there is obviously a lot of outrage over the platform and what we're seeing detailed in this. AOC reacted to all of that and said this.
I just don't care. I think these folks call everyone they don't like a communist. I think that America is a free country. They're out here palling around with whoever they want to pal around with. So what? People can do what they want. I'm not here to be the belief police around here.
It appears she's sympathizing with these socialists.
Yeah, two things can be true here, right? Like the DSA platform can be extreme and insane and not actual Democrats, and no actual Democrat believes in anything that they are putting forward. And also people that the right doesn't like and Trump doesn't like, you get called a communist. So I think both of these things can be true. I just think when it comes to Michigan, there are a lot more independents and there are a lot more middle of the road Democrats that believe that we should have a fair economy and do not believe Donald Trump's policies are working for them. And I think that's why it gives Haley Stevens a leg up here.
Ben?
But Meghan, that's not why they're voting for him. They're voting for him because of the radical beliefs that he has about Israel and Hamas and all of these other crazy things. You know that. Haley Stevens is when it comes to the economic policies, Haley Stevens is perfectly fine when it comes to, a Democratic candidate. The reason that El-Sayed is somebody who is, I think, a clear and present danger to your party is because of the crazy things that he believes about Jews, about Israel, and about our international role. And I think that that's a problem that you're not going to solve just in this cycle. I think it's something that's going to endure with you beyond it.
I don't disagree with you at all. I 100% agree that that's part of the reason that he's catching fire here is some of his really radical views, which is disappointing as a Democrat. I don't think that we need to be spouting some of these views, all of the views actually of the DSA. I don't believe in any of it. So I just think, you have to stunt it here. You have to beat El-Sayed and then you move forward, and it starts there.
Just incredible. And I'm
Good luck, Meghan.
This is a debate I'm sure will heat up for the next 100 days for sure. Meghan, Ben, good to have you both on. Thank you. All right, Bill?
Great conversation.
All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with Me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.